this will be a good one. Seriously, we have also discussed what we won't be doing. And what we won't be doing is California bashing or windy Houston boosterism. Not that the Chicago portion of our audience would be interested in that anyway, but it's simply, too easy to pick easy targets, and to self-aggrandize rarely makes the place better. And Houston's all about making ourselves better. So we'll talk about real challenges and real issues in the environment today. So let's start with a softball. So you have been described, Antonio, as a global citizen. Obviously, you are a native of Argentina, as we heard. You have Italian heritage, have also lived in Italy. You have been a little bit of everywhere, including Houston previously in your career. Yeah. So we're so glad to have you back. But to what degree does being a global citizen inform your role as the head of a major employer?
Well, Paul, and everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for having me today. Pleasure to be here to have a conversation with you, and hopefully we can answer as many questions as possible. I consider myself privileged, and in the sense that I grew up in a very diverse family who were immigrants, right? So these are people that wanted to find a better home after a terrific set of events with 2 wars, right? And my father immigrated to Argentina in 1958. He got married with my mom by not knowing her, typical time, there was an arranged marriage at the time. My mother was 19, my father was 32. And they put my mom on a boat. They said, go meet your husband, almost 20 years old, and 3 weeks away. And hopefully you have a good life. But that marriage, had a very strong ties. They were happy together for 52 years until my father passed away. But the fact that I was able to live in many cultures and countries allowed me to observe and assimilate, and then shape my leadership in ways that probably other people can't. Understanding the humanity factor, understanding the cultural differences, but also using those aspects in a way to drive convergence and collaboration. And today I have the privilege to lead an iconic company which has Hewlett and Packard in the brand. Think about that, and I am actually the 5th CEO within the company. This company obviously went through a split in 2015, which our joint friend Meg Whitman executed because we felt, being a large company, $120 billion and 7 line of business was not what the market demanded focus and unique execution in each of the segments. But the fact of the matter, I'm leading a company that has an amazing brand and amazing heritage. And at the core of that is the purpose, Paul. The purpose to advance the way people live and work. And the way we do that is by engineering experiences that unlock your full potential. And as a CEO, I have a tremendous responsibility not only to bring the right innovation to our customers and partners that work with us, but to really deliver business outcomes for both the business side and the community side by giving back to the communities. And to me, and I have been now in the United States for 22 years, is the country where I live the most, believe it or not, and is the country where my kids were born and raised, and is the country I consider home. And Houston is my home, is my town. And that's why I'm so happy to be back.
Wow, well, that is a perfect entree to a series of other questions. You and I have talked about certain collaborations that HPE has with higher education in Houston. I think we can also say that Houston has yet to accomplish the virtuous cycle that a lot of people have defined, and that is between education, innovation, and commercialization. So to what extent and at what levels of higher education are you doing those interfaces? And as you said before, this isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. So can you flesh all that out for us?
Absolutely. I mean, I always said, Paul, we are as good as the people we have in the company. And in today's environment, particularly in the IT industry, things move at lightning speed. And having the right talent at the right time with the right attitude is essential to compete and win. As a technology company, I have 2 things: technology on the innovation side and the people. And without those 2, you can succeed. And that's why our collaboration with the local, the Texas universities are super important. And again, I know there is a lot of rivalry here, so I want to be careful, but the fact of the matter, we have collaboration with all of them, whether it's the University of Houston, whether it's Texas A&M, even UT, Rice University. We worked with them and through them, to make sure we not only support them with the right thinking about curriculum. In the case of University of Houston, we have established an Institute of AI, artificial intelligence, where we provide a lot of the content that gets taught in the courses, but also with working with all the universities to source the talent that we need. But it's not only the high-end education, Paul, because I'm a unique kind of product of the apprenticeship model. Because when I was in Argentina, I decided to join a middle school inside a military base, not as a military individual, but as a civilian, where I went to military school and I learned a practice, an apprentice on one specific area, which at the time I was fascinated by electronics. So after my 3 years of middle school, I was able to work in the shipyard, repairing radar and sonar. And like said, unfortunately, I had to participate in a war. And I was only 15 years old. Think about it. The conflict between the UK and Argentina at the time, which was a silly, stupid conflict. But that said, there is different jobs and different curriculums you can bring. And that's why I'm excited to also potentially work with the local community colleges. In fact, my son is graduating here in 3 weeks, I guess. And he and I agreed that the best thing he can do is join a community college at this time, because unlike my daughter, which was way more prepared, way more mature and ready, he's still thinking about what he wants to do. But I don't want him to lose time and momentum. So he's going to join the Lone Star College here in Houston, which is a fantastic school too.
Well, that is great. As you know, Brett mentioned my history with the Greater Houston Partnership. Gina Luna, who succeeded me, did a great job with Upskill Houston, because it really is those middle skill organizations. We all like to talk about Rice and U of H and 4-year degrees, but it is the critical workforce, by and large, is coming from those closer to you, sort of, to your organization. So good for you.
But honestly, Paul, we all as leaders have to do more with our education system. I mean, if you think about it, the success of this country over the decades, right, is when the education system, the private sector and the public sector work together. And that's where the major breakthroughs, we're sending a man to the moon, or obviously dealing with a hardship or wars. Technology plays a huge role, and getting people into STEM, math and science, and educating them the right way is essential for us to stay ahead of the game, right? Especially in this geopolitical environment where it's not longer just the warfare, but is the warfare has changed into what we see today with cyber attacks and hacking. Look up at the Colonial Pipe the other day, right? And what happened, right? We got to be better prepared.
Yeah, the cyber subject, my suspicion is we're going to have some chat room questions about that one. So I'm consciously holding that in reserve. But as we move through Houston's strengths, the other thing that Houston has in abundance is a clinical footprint and a research footprint in healthcare. I don't know to what degree that was a driver in your decision to locate the headquarters here or not, but I'm assuming, because all my wet science friends have seemed to defaulted to the position that IT is the future of genomics and personalized healthcare. So to what degree are you interfacing with that community?
Extensively. And we have also very strong partnerships here locally with entities like Texas Children's Hospital, where obviously what we do saves lives, saves, children. And, and think about some of the use cases, right? So whether it's providing live MRI capabilities, or whether it's providing cloud technologies at the edge where doctors need to make decisions in a matter of seconds and minutes, right, to save life, or whether it is to find cures to diseases, or whether it's to find the genomic, right? So think about the genomics, right? It took whatever, 10 plus years to match the first genome of an individual, and more than $200 million. Think about what it takes now. Nothing. Just you can do it now, immediately, almost. And for for cents of dollars, right? And so, and when I think about, diseases like dementia or think about Alzheimer, a great example is what we do with an entity, not here, but we will obviously partner here as well, is with the DZNE, which is an entity in Germany that basically is using our in-memory computing capabilities and high-performance computing capabilities to really map the entire neurons of our brain that eventually can find those proteins that eventually will cure these terrible diseases. And in Germany, what they're doing is scanning the brains of 30,000 citizens that willingly agreed to do that. And then with our computing capabilities, we are mapping every aspect. And by 2026, 2027, we will be able to map the entire brain. Or think about COVID. I mean, it took us 9 months to find the vaccine. That was not possible before. And we are proud because we supported the White House at the time with our own intellectual property and high performance computing systems to basically crunch a lot of the data. And what is more exciting was coming next, because we just 2 months ago, we put a supercomputer in space. The other day, I got a text on my screen that actually was a screenshot of the supercomputer 256 miles from the Earth processing data there for researchers connected to a cloud like Microsoft Azure. But what I'm excited is in the next 12 months, you're going to see enormous innovation of what we call the exascale. It's basically 18 zeros to the comma, which allows you to process billion square transactions per second. So there is no reason why we could not find cures or solve some of the biggest societal problems with those capabilities going forward. So very excited. But obviously it takes us working together locally. And now what I'm attracted to Houston is the diverse thinking, the diverse access to talent, the ecosystem of industries where we can co-innovate. And as you and I discussed, is how we bring that capital mindset here to develop those technologies going forward.
Well, that's a perfect answer. So let's keep clicking through the 10 poles, and you keep consciously or unconsciously teeing me up just right. They're now 3D printing in space. And the reason it's exciting to me that HPE is a hardware company and a software company, we'll come back to the riddle of the Sphinx, the big question about whether software really eats the world. But Houston is a manufacturing town. And so we can talk about AI and we can talk about machine learning all we want to, but until we apply those things on the ground, and Houston's catching up. It probably wasn't where it needed to be, but there is the maker space now in east of downtown, as you know.
Yep.
The airport system is doing some very exciting things with, well, I probably can't say, I'm not sure that these announcements are out, but they're doing some very cool additive, subtractive manufacturing robotic stuff down at Ellington Air Force at the old Ellington Air Force Base, which is now a spaceport. So Houston's catching up, and the fact that you are both hardware and software to me is a perfect fit. So can you talk a bit about digital manufacturing in space, on the ground, anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we as a country always build things, and I think Houston is a perfect location to bring that back. If you think about some of the challenges we live today, Paul, I mean, unfortunately, over the years, for whatever reason, we start outsourcing the manufacturing to other countries because of a labor arbitrage. But what we didn't realize is that in the process of doing so, we lost our core competency, which is all that innovation around the manufacturing and quality and efficiency and intellectual property, which is insane. I mean, if the analogy I make is that if gold is required to print money, you need a lot of memory to manage the data that we manage today. And so memory is the new gold. And we live in a digital economy. Think about what's going on with Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and blockchain. And we need to manufacture those technologies in the United States. We cannot rely on other countries. I think Houston.
Antonio, you just went on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. With the mentality that we had here and the process that we had here with semiconductor, with Texas Instruments and others, we have the capabilities to build here. So we need to bring that back because we need to own our own destiny. We cannot rely on others like we were oil dependent in the past. Now we are no longer. dependent. And so we need these basic technologies on here. And I think together we can create that ecosystem and do it here locally. So I'm excited about the prospect. But again, you asked me earlier on why we moved to Houston. Part is the attitude. We have an attitude here in Texas, go get it done. And when people rally behind the mission, it gets done. And that's what the key, get the line on the mission and do it faster.
Well done. Well, I was smiling as you were doing your little statement on domestic manufacturing, because if I didn't know that Meg Whitman was your friend before, I know it now, because I have heard literally that speech using those words. So I don't know who taught it to who, but you and Meg are you're a good team. In fact, she sent me a book about Make It in America or something like this, but she's been playing that note skillfully for a good long time. So let's go to the big one. In other places, when we say the word energy, that means something. In Houston, it doesn't mean that much because it's such a big category. You know, there's
Right.
It breaks out fairly linearly into upstream, midstream, and downstream. But each one of those have incredible permutations. Each one is becoming more data intensive. Each one is becoming more automated for safety, efficiency, and all sorts of reasons. But talk about the energy sector writ large and where you're most fascinated and think you can add the most value today.
Well, I mean, I can speak from where I sit and what we're doing to make the world more energy efficient. And the amount of innovation in that space is mind-boggling. I mean, the technologies I talked before about these exascale supercomputers. So you think about it. Today, you know, the way it's done, it requires almost a power plant next to those systems, right? And we can do here. But the question is how we do it more efficiently. And those systems are liquid cooled because, you know, there is a circular aspect of it where we can take the heat dissipation through the liquid side and power other things. We have customers that are using that technology. While they power efficiently those systems, we're actually using the recirculation to power the energy of the building or melting snow in the parking lots. And I think the mentality here in Houston will allow us how we innovate the next more efficient set of energies, capabilities in this new data-driven enterprise. Because there is a lot of innovation happening upstream and downstream, as you think about it, upstream and how to think about the source of the power, and downstream how we build the systems. And in the building of the systems, one of the things that Hewlett Packard Enterprise is doing with our HP labs is innovating all these basic technology. Today, when you buy one of the cloud computed servers, is a lot of gold and copper. That's not good for the environment. Obviously, it's incredibly expensive, and it has ramifications on e-waste and so forth. We are now using technologies like silicon photonics and other things that not only cost a fraction of that, but it's way more energy efficient. Today, 20% of the global power consumption pool is used to power these large data centers. It's not sustainable. A glass of water is way more efficient than a room of full air. So we know we can do things in a different scale for these zettabytes of data we're creating every day. Because 2 years from now, we're going to create more data than the entire human history created in the last 22,000 years. So I think locally, we can partner the IT industry and the energy companies together to design this new innovation, which I think Houston has the God-given right to own. Nobody else understands that. And I think we just need to get behind because our Chinese friends will never do that. They follow, right? So we have an opportunity there to set another set of intellectual properties that are unmatched in my view.
The God-given right. Wow, that's a sacred charge. I like it. You might hear that again. Since you talked about efficiency and you sort of veered towards ESG, let's go ahead and go there. HPE has pledged to achieve a net zero emissions profile, like a lot of leading corporate citizens, and certainly that's a noble goal. The question is how you're going to get there. Are you going to use less fossil fuels? Are you going to do more low carbon stuff? Are you going to purchase offsets? Are you going to buy LED bulbs? You're going to water cool your data centers. How are you going to get there?
It's a combination of many things, Paul, but I will say I'm not a fan of purchasing stuff, offsets. that's not innovation. That's a financial engineering thing. Maybe in the PE side you can do those things, but I have to tell you, as an engineer, I love solving problems. And the only way you can do that is through breakthrough thinking and innovation. So our new site, as you know, we're going to open it at the beginning of a new year, is going to have all renewable energies. We're going to have that site 100% self, driven. And then we are innovating these technologies that not only improve the performance, but the efficiency. But we have a concept called the circular economy, Paul, here. And the circular economy is all about, when I think about the systems empowering these new worlds in a data-driven environment, how I think from the time I procure the minerals all the ways to the end of life of that product. And that's what we call the circular economy. It's good for sustainability, it's good for economic development, but it's good also for addressing other social issues like slavery and all that, because we measure our suppliers where you got that component, right? Which mines you got it. We go all the way back and we secure that entire supply chain from the beginning to the end, because we are one of the largest providers to the US government. And it's not just about making the system secure, it's about the secure supply chain. And when we think about a circular economy, is what economic value we can create. And we have shown that we can create 99.5% return on those systems over the life of the product, because only 0.5% gets wasted. But 0.5% is still too much in the context of what we're trying to do for the planet. So we are thinking all of that is all about renewable energy, is all about breakthrough innovation in the hardware and software levels. And then is the business model that comes with it, how we think about the circular economy that improves both the capital utilization and the environmental aspects of it.
Very good. Let's talk about social issues and what's the proper role of a major employer. For our Chicago audience, I'm sure you have the functional equivalent of our argument in Illinois, but this is a loaded question in the sense that our legislature is in session. There's various reforms, depending on who you listen to, they are either in pursuit of election integrity or voter suppression. And so there has been gnashing of teeth in the Houston corporate community. We're obviously a very diverse city and proud of that. But there are other business issues before the legislature where
yep.
people would like to spend whatever capital there is. So how does that shake out inside HPE?
It's core. I mean, listen, when you think about our investors today, they want to invest in companies that care about these things. And our employees care a lot about these things. In fact, they demand that the CEO takes a stance on these issues. You can no longer hide behind the curtains. And honestly, you don't need to. I mean, we as individuals have a responsibility to speak up and be present. What we saw last year on the events that clearly traumatized our country with, social injustice and other things were totally unacceptable. And I was one of the first to speak up, in the sense that demand that we take action. And the first thing you have to do, which I have done throughout my company in the last 12 months, is listening. One thing I came to the conclusion is we lack of education here. In fact, today I had another listening tour about our veterans. What is top of mind for them, how we can support them. But inside the company, you have a set of communities, whether it's the African American, the Asian, and the Pacific Islanders, the Latinos, the LGBT, and the veterans. I can go on and on. But the fact is, we need to step back, listen, educate, and take action. And the actions is what will create trust, because everybody, I think, for the most part, is well-intended, Paul. Everybody has the right intentions, but sometimes we don't know what to do with it. And that's why inside our company, we have established a group of people that are actually normal employees, that they are chaired by me and one of our board members that tackles these ESG issues. On one end is sustainability. And it's interesting, the other day we were running an innovation quest. The innovation happens at every level, right? And one of the things that came out, the top two innovations were innovations around selling ESG ready products. The way you package the product, the way you price the product, the way you make the products available in your catalog. There was an amazing set of innovation for employees that were really around the ESG challenges. But that was an example, right? But we actually established 4 key pillars: inclusion, number one; advocacy, community, and action. Those were the 4 things that came out of it. And we're driving those actions with the employees, 60,000 strong employees, because that's the way you build the culture. And then translate that into actions at the corporate level that we transparently disclose in what we call our living progress report. We disclose pay equity, we disclose our diversity metrics, we disclose everything. The more you disclose, the more transparent you become, the more trust you build, and then ultimately, hopefully everybody comes along. But you have to take a position, stand up, and then most importantly, listen and take action.
Well done. I've got a couple, maybe 3 more softballs, and then we will go to the chat room function. So those of you in the audience that are ginning up good questions, feel free to start lobbing them in now. The first one really is the COVID question. You talked about culture just now and how you build culture, and you're obviously using rigorous transparency, maybe not quite to the Ray Dalio level, but a rigorous transparency to build culture at HPE. Is that because the water cooler is less available and presumably will be less available as a bonding device? Is this in lieu of in person, or is this happening anyway?
It's happening anyway, and it's who I am. I mean, fundamentally, that's how I operate. It's one of my principles, right? And I believe when you approach employees that way, remember at HPE, we had a policy which is called the open door policy, which is something that Bill and Dave established for themselves. That's why they were never closed offices. They were all cubicles that people can walk by and have a conversation anytime. Whether it was the water cooler or just stop by the desk. But in today's environment with social media and other things, the reality is that you can't hide anything. It just comes out. And so, I always said, if you are convicted of something, a fast no is better than a long yes. And that's where, having those transparent discussions is better. People will respect that versus the wishy-mushy type of things, and then they know who you stand for, what you stand for. That's the key here. So yeah, obviously today we are working remotely, and we made an announcement that we are planning to reopen our offices up to 20% on July 19. That will bring people back together, and hopefully we can get back in person and have this conversation. But it's who I am, Paul. That's the way I operate.
Well, it's interesting that you're able to project culture, in the absence of physical proximity. My personal experience is people that know each other, you can skip a year and do this by Zoom, but onboarding, whether it's first assignment employees or board members, is quite difficult without the nuance and the physical.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's why we are using a myriad of different things, right? Obviously, digital technologies are helping quite a bit, but nothing replaces the human interaction, when you're together. And that's why one of the things we have done in preparation for the reopening is redesigning all our workplaces, where basically the new offices, call it, will be all open. Only 20% of the people, by the way, in our company will have a dedicated desk. Everybody will have what we call an edge solution that we are actually funding for our employees, but 100% of the people can come to the office to collaborate, socialize, and do the things we just talked about it, which is important. But I think we are going to learn a new way to work together.
Great. Let's ask the sort of, does software eat the world question? And let's make sure we include blockchain in the answer, because obviously blockchain is not a technological marvel. It's just made possible by the brute force of very fast computing and cheap bandwidth and cheap storage. So does blockchain / storage eat the world?
I mean, this whole say software in the world is interesting, but remember, the way I think about it, hardware is the oxygen that gives the software the ability to do what it does. So, I mean, fundamentally, what you see is a divergence of the architectures, and obviously, I'm fascinated about this and something that I can spend hours on it because we drive a lot of innovation, and I'm rolling my sleeves, and I'm an engineer by core. But what you see is a divergence, right? So the hardware as we knew it in a monolithic approach is not going to be there. It's going to be totally disaggregated. You have silicon becomes way more intelligent, programmable, that the software can make, can create unique experiences. And this whole thing about where we live today, right? You and I, Paul, probably grew up in the same generation where we grew up with a mainframe and a green terminal. That was a marvel, right? But those are available to only few people. Then we went to the PC client server. Wow, now we have a word processing, capability and Excel spreadsheets, but that was at the departmental level. Then the internet came along, and now we start connecting departments and enterprises in the world in ways we couldn't imagine before. But today we live in what I call the mobile first, cloud first approach. Is that your mobile phone is your new terminal. Think about the Swiss Army knife, right? It can take a picture, it can send an email, it can browse the web. Sometimes does things that to your own detriment, right? Depending how you use it. But that's the new terminal. It's more fun than the green terminal, but the mainframe, as we know, is the cloud, is the brain. But the problem with that model is still very centralized, and it is still creating a lot of complexity and friction. The cloud brings speed and agility, but what you need is to focus on the data. And data has a gravitational force, because whether in your company, right, is your most precious asset. I argue maybe 5, 10 years from now, you will have data in your balance sheet as a tremendous asset. The question is how we get insight from the data. And that's why people talk about monetizing data. No, what we're thinking about is monetizing insights. You talk about hospitals, right? You have competitive clinics here. But boy, if there is a way to monetize the insight, not the data, and help the other ones, that would be helpful. That's where blockchain comes in play. So since you brought blockchain, let me tell you an example of what we're doing with autonomous driving, which I think Houston, if we build the right infrastructure with the phenomenal highway system we have here, we can be a powerful, community. But think about it. You driving, I don't know, a Kia, and the one in front of you is a Mercedes, and the storm comes by. Boy, there is a flash flooding going on. The guy in front of you says, boy, there is all water there. In the autonomous driving vehicle, you're going to collect a lot of data to sensors, right? But I'm not going to share the data with you. What I'm going to share is, Paul, hey, be aware behind me, you're going to find a lot of water. And through the blockchain, the cars are talking to each other and transacting that insight. Maybe it's 10 cents, right? Because the problem is the Kia car will have a platform, and the Mercedes will have a different platform. And how we homogenize those platforms is through these technologies like blockchain, but then monetizing the insights of the data that each of the cars are talking to each other. 5G is another great example. 5G obviously will create new use cases. But the problem is latency plays a huge role. Can you imagine having tens of thousands of cars? You can't go to the cloud to the antenna to go back to the car. Hey, Paul, I'm on your left, be aware. We need to create technologies that are more now what I call edge-centric, cloud-enabled, and data-driven. And that's, I think, the future in a much more distributed enterprise. Yes, you will have a brain, but every car, every computer, every single point at the end will be a cloud. So you're going to have millions of clouds connected to big clouds that they are acting and operating in an autonomous way. And that's the exciting part that we can create together around the data.
Well, mesh technologies and edge computing, you're right. We could have that conversation for a long time, but the most exciting thing that you just threw out there, and the accountants are in a tizzy, but the whole idea that data itself could be cryptocurrency hiding in in plain sight, and how would you value it on a balance sheet? Wow, that'll be a whole nother webcast.
Yeah.
Let's just throw it open and say, talk about Houston's challenges. What should we be working on? And this could be drainage, it could be higher ed, it could be cloud seeding, whatever you want it to be. And then we'll go to the
Well, I think Houston has a lot in its favor, right? Excuse me. It has great infrastructure, great education system. As I said, an attitude to get stuff done, business policy friendly. Obviously, the tax is a plus. But I think it's how we create, and this is what we talk about Houston, and I saw some of the questions, Austin and whatever it is, and this is about the power of Texas and creating ecosystems over time that they work together. And I think Houston has a lot to offer from that perspective, but it's all about attracting capital, right? And so I was in the Bay Area for 6 years. I'm not a product of the Bay Area, but obviously Bay Area has tremendous strength. But the question is, how many of the startups can get access to talent here, to the higher end education, and then, as we said before, other type of skill sets with the right capital investment, that a lot of the future innovation gets done here. And I think is, as we spend time with education, we need to spend time on the other side, the big capital companies that can see Houston as a way to invest. And we need to create that environment. We as a company, by the way, people may not know, but we have our own kind of investment capital arm where we invest in small companies every year. And we invest maybe 20, 30 companies every year. It can be as small as $2 million or as much as $100 million, right? And we are looking for those companies in Houston that we can invest here locally. But you can imagine all the famous companies in the Bay Area start shifting some of the investment here. That's what we need to create, because the rest is all here, is available. It's just bringing the entire ecosystem together.
Great. Well, thank you. Let's go to the chat room function, and we'll do this sort of in order. There's a couple of these questions that easily mash together, and I'll do that. But let's start with the question from Candace Kodoritz, and that is highly technical. Do you need an anti-gravity environment to compute billions squared data, i.e. computers in space?
Well, we designed these supercomputers to be able to operate in space. Gravity is one aspect. Obviously, resilience is another aspect. Astronauts are super smart people, but they don't know anything about computers. They know about procedures, right? And remember, in the ISS, in the International Space Station, where our spaceborne supercomputer number 2 is now today operating, most of the people are research individuals, doctors, right? That they do research in space. And we don't want them to do anything with the computer. We want them to analyze data and let the computer run autonomously. And think about it. We put this on one of the rockets with General Dynamics in February. It was a Katherine Johnson rocket. Think about the forces of shooting a rocket, and then eventually getting the gravitational force, and then eventually dock. That supercomputer was bulletproof for that. But the reason why we need to put there is because if you're going to go back to the moon, eventually to Mars, many of you probably watched the movie Passengers. Remember that movie with Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence? When he wakes up and said, "Oh, I'm in trouble. Let me contact Mission Control." He finally finds that console. He's so excited, types the email, and when he says sends, it says it will take 75 years to reach Mission Control. He says, "Oh boy, I will be dead by then. I'm already 30." So that's why he started thinking about what else he can go do. And so we need to bring more computation along the journey these astronauts will have. And that's why we're thinking about, if we do research in space, will make us better on Earth. But at the same time, to accomplish these missions, you have to have communication hubs all along the way. And the only way to do it is by starting there and then moving to the next, which probably will land some sort of supercomputer on the moon, because you need that in order to get to Mars. And we are partnering with NASA on that journey, which is remarkable. It's just fascinating. And by the way, if we can innovate there, we can bring it to the commercial space here on Earth.
Well, I'm embarrassed as a member of the citizen of Space City that it only took me recently to understand how real the new gold rush in space. It's been the final frontier for so long, but it's pretty exciting as you bring launch costs down by 5x, the sort of things that become economically feasible. But pretty exciting. let's keep going with the questions, and this will be a
Yeah.
little linear, as you understand. Uh, receptivity of energy companies to work with HPE to create and innovate more uh, efficient data centers and renewable sources of energy.
Yeah, I mean, and we work with a lot of them, whether it's Baker Hughes or Schlumberger or ExxonMobil or BP. You know, the BP supercomputer center is all Hewlett Packard Enterprise that we built over the years. So there is a lot of things we are working with them directly. I think the opportunity now we are here is to jointly commercialize those solutions in the marketplace, not just develop us for them, but together sell that set of capabilities if they decide to go into that market, right? And so we're having conversation with few of them about what that entails and how we can together, you know, like I said earlier, take advantage of the opportunity we see in front of us with joint development technologies.
Well, let me pick on the question a little bit, because when the asker of the question says energy companies, I think she means, because she knows that we also interpret that as oil and gas. We've got to break that linkage, you know. And
Yeah.
energy is it's a thermal unit, it is an electron, whatever it is. We've got to become more agnostic about where it comes from, because energy is not just oil and gas. So Houston has to work
Correct.
to reform our terminology. The next question is, if you don't know Alfred Moran, he is a known troublemaker, so I'm not surprised at all. But he's poking the bear on Houston versus Austin. But I don't know if you can see the question. I'll read it.
Yeah, I do. I see it here. I see it here. I think, but we should read it for the audience so that people know what we're asking.
Houston seems to be in a race with Austin to attract technology companies and brain power. What is your opinion about how this ostensible race might turn out? Obviously, I'm cheering for Houston.
And so but I think both will win in the long term. I think Texas as a state will win. You know, and that's why I said before, some sort of coordination and smartness have to play, right? Because everybody wants these highly valuable companies to create jobs and bring capital to their own cities. But the reality, each city has their own strengths in different areas. And I think, you know, listen, the fact of the matter is that a lot of IT companies here, in fact, I think HPE, when we open the new headquarters, will be in the top 10. But then from the IT perspective, right, probably in the top 5. But that said, you know, I think if there is dialogue, both towns can win, and both have different things to offer. I think for some people in the Bay Area, maybe more palatable in many ways to move to Austin because of the cultural aspect. But when you really look at capability, I mean, listen, I don't know you, when I went to Austin, traffic is insane, not different than Houston. But boy, the roads are not ready to absorb any of that. Houston is ready for that. You know, the development side of the house, I think Houston has better capabilities. It's all about the talent, right? Access. And to me, I felt totally confident. Again, maybe the advantage I had, Paul, at the time was that I lived here for 80 years ahead of my comeback, and I know what Houston has to offer. And that's why creating a playbook, I think you and I discussed this before, a playbook to really showcase what we have to offer, soup to nuts, from capital investment to infrastructure to talent to policies to development, is essential here versus just one-off all the time.
Well, the next question is from Manfred Sternberg, and I will read it, and then I will sort of give it color if you want it. Sometimes the best ideas come from outside your industry, but how do you get the attention of leadership in order to discuss innovation that is disruptive to the status quo, but benefits the broader industry and the community? The spin I wanted to put on that is, I don't know if it was George Gilder or Peter Drucker who said that every company should have a vice president of innovation. And that's the way I'm interpreting that question. Who's in charge of bringing big, hairy ideas into HPE and breaking enough China such that the rest of you will pay attention?
Well, I agree with Manfred about sometimes the best idea comes outside the company. You know, I think about innovation in 3 legs stool. One is your organic innovation, and it's everybody's job, not the job of the CTO, the chief technology officer. Always you want someone that can shape, be the spiritual leader that owns the architecture of what you're doing, so you can go faster and further in a more organized way. But the reality is that, as I told you earlier, right, Paul, we just ran this innovation quest, and there were people in services to financial services to global operations to supply chain. Innovation happens at every level. The question is how you create an environment for them to come forward, listen to the ideas, follow through the ideas, pick the one that makes more sense, recognize all of them anyway, and then fail fast and improve. Because the fact is that innovation, for the most part, is all about failures. And you will fail 8, maybe 9 times out of 10. But the culture is the essential part of this, right? Which is fail fast and improve. I'd rather try something and fail than sitting on the sidelines for the perfect idea. That's not who we are. But innovation comes through from organic. The other one is inorganic. Sometimes you have to go and acquire companies. But the way I think about companies, put aside the return on invested capital, all the financial metrics that our shareholder hold us accountable to, is the fact that you need to bring IP and new talent in the organization on an ongoing basis. That's a way to refresh the thinking, improve the culture, and then obviously bring new talent. And last but not least is the partnership. And partnerships is sometimes, think about companies that are very disruptive, but you want to keep it close. I call it a little stallion in the little barn riding around. Make sure you control it, but feed the stallion with your own money so they get close to you and integrate those solutions in your portfolio. And the other one is just create an ecosystem of partners that they are willing to innovate with you, whether it's in this case energy companies or whatever. But I spend 50% of my time talking to customers, partners all the time, because I have a say. This say comes from our joint friend, Meg Whitman. The truth is in the cold face. And when you talk to customers, you get the truth in the sense that they will tell you what the problems are. Sometimes they want you to do things differently, but in the end, that's where you get the best ideas, is by talking to customers, partners every single day.
The last question there, it's not the last question we'll use, it just happens to be the last question on the list. I think you just answered it, and that was basically, how do you integrate acquisitions into the innovative culture of HPE?
It's different. That's an art and a science. I have to say, I have done 20 acquisitions in the last 5 years, Paul. And I will continue to do many more, right? That's the way of life. But I have not played the same book all the time. Different acquisition, they require different plans. Let me give you an example. We have a fantastic portfolio now around connectivity and digital experiences with Aruba. Aruba is a company I acquired in 2015. I did a complete reverse integration. I took the assets of HPE in the connectivity space and I reverse integrated into the Aruba organization. I preserved the brand. So you see, it's called HPE Aruba, a Hewlett Packard Enterprise company. The leadership had a unique set of values around innovation and culture that I absolutely wanted. I reverse integrated my assets to them. It was like more than somebody. Wait a minute, you bought the company, it should be a Hewlett Packard. No. And by the way, it has been incredibly successful. On the other hand, I bought another company called SGI and Cray Supercomputers, created equal with our organic business. Same people, very specialized people, unique set of people around high performance computing, deep engineering. The sooner I brought together, the better it was. So, and the one learning here is that don't disrupt the way to do business just because you want to scale quickly, because sometimes the IT systems get in the way, to be honest with you. That's my learning and the process. So let them do what they do best, and then open your go-to-market, which is our crown jewel as a company. We have 200,000 partners. We do business in 172 countries. Let's use that footprint to open the doors. They will die for that. They will pay. They will give their life for that. But then not for the sake of integration. Let's integrate it and bureaucratize everything. Absolutely not. And it's hard. I have to say, Paul, is incredible hard because you always with attention. But I always say, what is the best for my customers and my employees, and then we'll figure out the rest.
Well, if there was a magic formula, we wouldn't be asking the question. But we have learned that efficiencies and economies of scale are not always the same thing. And so sometimes you design for one and sometimes for the other.
Correct.
Let's keep going. I think George Gonzalez has a question about the sort of distributed nature of Houston. Are you going to distribute your business centers to accommodate geographic diversity, or is density an objective?
No, I mean, listen, we have sales offices around, but my office will be one which I'm building is going to be an amazing combination of architecture, digital technologies, and experiences coming into the Springwood Village. And I'm super proud. I mean, you know, I'm an engineer, but I'm also a professor in arts, and I love design. And in that context, I'm actually the chief designer for the interior of the building. And it's fascinating working with the architects and decorators because they could not comprehend, wait a minute, why the CEO is spending all this time with us and telling us he wants that view that way, this wall painted that way, because in the end, it's all about your brand and your experience. And that will be one of my legacy, right? I want to make sure this site is second to none. It's going to be the best showcase of our company in Houston, Texas, that we bring customers every single day and partners. And when you walk into that building, I want you to live and breathe Hewlett Packard Enterprise innovation and the people. And the way you do it is by designing this thing from the grounds up. But we will be located in that site, and then we're going to have a couple of satellites just because of the sales offices. But that's going to be our site, which we're going to have probably 4,000 people by the time we're done.
Well, the magic mixture of bricks and mortar and environment and culture. If those of you who have not been to the Exxon campus, and it's not easy to go to the Exxon campus in the Woodlands, I assume you've been there, Antonio, but
many times.
Fabulous. It's there's a lot of thought went in.
Well, it's the same architect, except that you know, Tillerson was not, I guess, involved in the interior. I learned a few things about that side, but I am, you know. And I said, you know, listen, if they ask me, when you retire, what do you want to do? Well, I wish I can go back. I will be an architect. I will be an architect. I enjoy that part of
Next slide. Maybe post HPE. Let me push a couple of questions together here because they deserve to be pushed together, and we're going to run out of time if we don't. The My Brother podcast asked, how does Houston position itself as the center of energy innovation as a transition from being the oil and gas capital of the world? The same questioner asks, organizations within Houston have undertaken significant efforts to push in the direction of innovation, ION, TMC3, with our clear. So talk about the innovation equation in Houston, not just outward positioning and image, but the reality, because if we change the reality, the image will follow, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, and that's why I think Paul goes back a little bit of marketing and education, what this innovation does for not just Houston, but for the world. And sometimes, you know, we keep these things as best kept secrets. But the reality, I mean, you know, when I think about some of the things we do in this town that powers the global economy or supports communities, we need to do more of that. We need to be able to showcase that. And that's what I want to do when I build a new site, is showcase as much as innovation with our partners that we do here, and then eventually make sure together with the town, we actually take more aggressive steps in doing so. And then as new innovation comes on board, we want to make sure that we do it right from the beginning, not, you know, finding it 2-3 years out. And I think that's where HPE is actually very good about this. One of the things I'm really proud of is the ability to shape the narrative, the ability to shape the stories. And the best way to do it is by storytelling around the use cases. This is a problem that existed. Here is how we solve the problem through this unique innovation. Houston needs to do more of that.
Agreed. There's two other questions I'll lob out there, and Steve Horn is going to intervene here in a second and shut us down. But until he does, we have a question from Alex McDonald. How does HPE respond to being a BDS target, especially with its mission of social justice? A related social question from Edmund B. What are your views on critical security for the industry?
Listen, I'm not worried about being a target. What I'm worried about doing the right thing. And if we need to speak up and take action, we will do so. You will get to know me over time. I'm not the typical CEO. This is not about politics. It's about doing the right thing. We have a saying in the company that we need to solve humanity with humanity. We need to put the we before the I. We need to accelerate what is next. We need to be a force for good. And we need to be bold in everything we do. And in my position, as I said earlier, I have unique privilege to basically represent my 60,000 colleagues and be consistent in everything we do. Of course, there will be people that would not agree with me, and that's fine. It's totally fine, you know. And then, you know, put that innovation to work to solve some of these big societal problems. Security, obviously, you know, on the supply chain, we do a lot to secure a supply chain in ways others don't. That's why we work with the United States government in supporting very mission critical programs. But there is a lot in the technology that we're doing that at no point in time, Paul, we can talk about it. But if somebody has a specific question, happy to answer that question offline. I know we're running out of time. And I see Steve here ready to shut us down.
Well, thank you, Antonio, Paul, and our audience for a fabulous discussion. A lot of questions and a lot of feedback. So it's very good. I wanted to, in closing, just wanted to announce two programs that are coming up for HBS Club of Houston. May 20th is actually from Stanford Business School on Business and Earth, a conversation on power, grid stability, and renewable energy. Nisha Desai from our club is going to be a panelist. And on May 24th, please join us for a discussion with Dr. Dambisa Moyo and her dynamic perspective on the role of 21st century corporations, geopolitics, social and cultural change, and post-pandemic global economy. So both of those should be great programs. And Brett, thank you. Thanks to the Center for Houston's Futures participants and to ours and to our panelists. And we'll call that a program. And have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Steve and Brett and Paul. I enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, Antonio.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.